What happens after the last soldier falls on the battlefield? Few people imagine what really takes place when the sound of swords disappears, when the last scream fades and all that remains is the smell of blood, the weight of death, and silence. It is in this brutal setting that the real work of the Romans begins, because for them, war didn't end with the last defeated enemy. The battlefield, still pulsing with the memory of the clash, became a place of duty, calculation, and control. The chaos of battle gave way to military discipline. No other people of antiquity treated war with such coldness and method as the Romans, and that included what came after the fight. While many armies left the dead where they fell, the Romans saw the aftermath of battle as an extension of their strategy, a new phase of war, where organization was the most powerful weapon. But how to deal with hundreds, sometimes thousands, of bodies scattered across the ground? This was a mission known to few, and what you're about to discover is one of the most overlooked and impressive sides of Rome's war machine. After the battle, the first priority was to find those who were still breathing. Specialized teams, made up of soldiers trained to recognize the slightest signs of life, moved among the bodies, alert to any muffled groan or involuntary movement. Every second counted. In a field where death spread as fast as a plague, hesitation could be fatal. Wounded soldiers who could still move or respond were treated right there. Amid the destruction, improvised bandages, vinegar compresses, ties to stop the bleeding. Any resource was used to stabilize the men just enough until they could be taken to a safer place. But those in critical condition needed more than first aid. For them, Rome had created a solution that was almost unthinkable for the time. Field hospitals, erected near battle sites or inside temporary fortresses. These treatment centers received the most debilitated soldiers, offering extended care, rudimentary surgeries, and months of recovery. It wasn't just compassion, this was pure strategy. Every saved legionary was a valuable gear that could return to the war stronger than ever. And for those who, even though injured, would never fight again, Rome did not forget them. Disabled soldiers received pensions, land grants, or were reintegrated into administrative and support roles, still serving in some way the great imperial machine. But not all fallen bodies wore the red tunic of Rome. Scattered among the legionaries were also the enemies, warriors who hours earlier tried to destroy the empire, now reduced to defenseless wounded or anonymous corpses. And for them, fate was decided with the same strategic coldness that marked every Roman move. Enemies with military or political value were not discarded. On the contrary, they were rescued, treated, and kept alive with a very clear purpose: to serve as bargaining chips. A captured tribal leader, a renowned commander, or a noble heir could yield valuable concessions, gold ransoms, or even help bring entire peoples into submission without the need for more bloodshed. As for the rest, the reality was brutal. Wounded men without strategic use, common soldiers, unknown warriors, low-ranking fighters. Rarely were they shown mercy. Many were executed right on the battlefield, quickly and impersonally, to avoid the risks of uprisings, escapes, or simply to conserve precious resources. While I was thinking about this video, I became obsessed with understanding what led Rome to make such cold, precise, and ruthless decisions. And that's when I found the book Rome, Strategy of Empire. And honestly, it completely changed the way I see the Roman Empire. It's not just about wars, it's about control, power, and strategy in their purest and most brutal form. This book was the main source of inspiration for this video. Each chapter reveals how Rome thought like a machine, and you can access it too very easily. Just scan the QR code appearing on the screen, or click the link in the video description. Once the wounded had been removed from the field and the screams had finally stopped, the heaviest moment of all began. The moment when centurions, accompanied by scribes and officers, walked among the lifeless bodies with a new mission: to name the dead. Identifying the fallen was a duty that went far beyond military accounting. It was an act of respect, a ritual of honor. Each shield was inspected, each belt fragment, each bronze brooch engraved with a legionary's name. A small object might be all that remained to record who had fallen there. The officers meticulously wrote down the names, cohort numbers, origins, and, when possible, even the cause of death. Because for Rome, every dead soldier was a piece that needed to be catalogued, understood, and above all, respected. This practice was one of the ways to maintain order amid the chaos of war. But the count was only the beginning. The Romans took funeral rites seriously, very seriously. Not burying the dead was a sacrilege that threatened their relationship with the gods. And for a people so deeply connected to religious rituals, that was unthinkable. The bodies were gathered into mass graves, dug quickly but never without ceremony. A priest might be present for a brief prayer. In some cases, a small offering was thrown into the earth before the bodies of the soldiers, who once fought for Rome, were covered forever. When there was time, bodies were cremated, especially in the case of officers or soldiers whose families had left instructions or resources. The ashes were placed in urns and, when possible, taken home. It was a way to keep the warrior close, at least symbolically. High-ranking officers received funerals with honors, elaborate ceremonies with speeches, incense burning, torches, and the deep sound of Roman horns echoing through the valley. It was the legion's official farewell to those who had commanded, led, and died for Rome. Once the dead were buried, the wounded treated, and the prisoners processed, one last massive challenge remained: cleaning up the very stage of the tragedy. That's when the true ghosts of war appeared, the engineering troops known as fabrici, men who didn't wield gladii, but rather shovels, pickaxes, ropes, and hoes. Their mission was as essential as it was silent: to erase the trail of destruction left by battle. Their task was to remove any trace that could compromise the army's safety or health. Abandoned weapons, torn standards, pieces of armor scattered in the mud. All were gathered with near-obsessive precision. Each item had a designated fate: to reinforce arsenals, be recycled, or in symbolic cases, turned into trophies for future celebrations. Then came the temporary fortifications, improvised trenches, palisades of stakes hastily driven into the ground during the heat of combat. These structures were dismantled without hesitation, eliminating any chance of them being used by enemies in future attacks. But the hardest and darkest job was the removal of biological waste. Blood soaked the earth. Human remains, bone fragments, intestines, scattered viscera. Everything had to be removed or buried. It was a job done quickly but carefully, because a single mistake could be costly. Disease spared no one, not even the victors. Decontaminating the battlefield was a vital survival strategy. Epidemics could wipe out an entire army faster than any enemy sword. Rome, with its impressive sanitary awareness for the time, knew this. It knew that protecting the health of its legions was just as crucial as winning battles. That's why, where once there was pain and despair, a new scene gradually emerged. A clean, controlled plain, ready to be used again. Once the field had been purged of bodies and blood, one final treasure remained to be claimed: what the war had left behind. Weapons, shields, armor, helmets, all had value to the Romans. No metal, no leather, no broken spear was wasted. What could be reused was immediately collected, transported by cart or on soldiers' backs, and carefully catalogued to reinforce the legion's arsenal. A sword found among the dead could, with a few strikes from a Roman blacksmith, shine again on the front line just days later. Damaged pieces, in turn, had a different fate. Rome mastered the art of military recycling. Broken weapons were melted down to create new blades. Spear tips were resharpened. Shattered shields gave rise to fortification reinforcements or siege supports. Nothing was wasted in a war machine where every resource was precious. And what about enemy equipment? These could be given a second life, even more symbolic. Some were transformed into trophies, sent to Rome or to temples dedicated to the gods of war, like Mars and Bellona. Other times, barbarian armor, Celtic shields, or Germanic swords were stored in arsenals, awaiting the moment when Rome might need to equip allies, reinforce borders, or simply display the glory of its victories. The spoils of war, gold, jewels, equipment, even horses, were closely supervised by officers who tried to ensure everything was properly recorded and distributed according to military rules. Part was sent to the public treasury, part divided among the soldiers as a reward, and a generous portion reserved for the victorious general. some generals made a risky and powerful decision. They authorized free looting, a gesture that turned discipline into frenzy for a few hours, but in return, raised troop morale to almost uncontrollable levels. It was a price that was often worth paying to keep men loyal and willing to bleed for Rome in the next battle. And so, this is how Rome sealed its victories. Not just with swords, but with method, discipline, and a brutal ability to turn even devastation into strength. Every battlefield cleaned, every body buried, every weapon repurposed was part of a cycle that didn't end there. It was the silent preparation for the next march, the next conquest, the next chapter of imperial expansion. The cleanup of the battlefield was Rome's final assertion of power, a silent message, yet impossible to ignore. Here, even death obeys Rome. And so we reach the end of our story. Now, I want to hear your thoughts. Were you also surprised by Rome's organization after the chaos of battle? What impressed you the most in this story? Leave your answer in the comments. And if you enjoyed the story and want to see more epic content like this, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. In the video on your screen, we reveal the fate of Roman soldiers who were captured after a battle.